of things I forgot to mention last week. I remembered it Wednesday, so I'll go ahead and mention it now. I don't know if you're in the habit of doing this, but we like to, usually when Christmas time comes, we get this idea, at least I get it in my head. Here's kind of how much I can afford to spend. Here's what I can do, etc. But one of the things the Lord convicted me of years ago is to be trying to make sure it's about His birthday, and I want to be giving a gift to Him. And so one of the things that we're opening up for you, if you'd like to do this, is we're going to be taking up an offering for the Kirby's, for the orphanage in Johannesburg, and we'll be sending it out early December. And if you would like to participate in that, just notate it for the Kirby's, and we'll send them a bulk offering for some of the projects they have going on there. Also, if any of you men are interested in getting back into bringing a challenge message at the Waters, they called me again asking to restart that. So if you're interested, please see me, and then I can let them know what we can or can't do. But I'll leave that up to you to come to me on that one. And if you're here and you didn't bring anything to stay for the fellowship, stay anyways. We would love to have you. If there's not enough food, which there will be, I'll go get a pizza. We'll be good. So I just encourage you to stay. This is not just a time when we stay for food. This is the time when the fellowship is sweet. This is where you get to know people. This is where Hebrews 10 can come to life much more abundantly in our lives. So I encourage you, stay with us. Okay, young people, you can scram. Amber, it's good to have you back. I know you've been here before, so I won't go through the process. Evans may introduce you, but thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Trust it'll be a blessing for you in some way. Yeah, it's good to have you back too. How long are you guys back for before your next meetings? 1 week. Okay, well, they're getting things settled there. You can be turning your Bibles to Acts 25. Any of you ever remember, well, there's a lot of scenarios we could look at, but couple came to my mind. One was, you start a new job. And I don't know how, I've started multiple new jobs. And I can remember going into it, and every single time that I went in, there's that apprehension. You want to meet people. You want to put your best foot forward. You actually want to shower that week at some point. You want to make a good first impression when you start a new job. I'm thinking way back, but you get set up and you meet some person for the first time, maybe a blind date, whatever. And again, you want to shower, you want to comb your hair, you want to, not smell funny, but you want to put your best foot forward. Even when it comes to, if you're going to have people do things for you, you don't want to come out looking like a slob. You want to meet them. You want them to have a good first impression. You don't want to alienate people. And this time of year, we see this a lot. Politics, right? I mean, I'm thinking of one in particular, but there's a person that someone said to me, I might vote for them. I said, please don't. I mean, I know this person. I was there, kind of, so to speak, when they were getting kicked out of something that I was in. But all of a sudden, this person who was like major obnoxious mode can be friendly to everybody because they want that vote. They want to put that best foot forward. And you can see it especially with this politics. And when there's the new kid on the block, they want to look good. They don't want to alienate people. Well, that's what's going to happen in our text today. We've got a new kid coming in on the block. And that new kid, if I'm saying kid, but this new person on the block, his name, we just read about him, his name is Festus. And Festus he's going to be the new governor of Judea, Palestine, that whole area. And this is the first time we've seen him in the scriptures. And for what it's worth with Festus, We don't know a lot about this guy. But what is written in history says that Festus, he was a good ruler. He did a pretty good job overall at ruling the people, at helping the Jews and the Gentiles get along. He did a good job at this. Now, quick background. We're going to be starting in 25, verse 1, but look back at 24, chapter 24, verse 27. After 2 years, Porcius Festus came into Felix's room, into his position. Festus took over Felix's job, and Felix, he was wanting to show the Jews a pleasure. He's wanting to do them a favor, so he left Paul bound. Now, this passage doesn't tell us what happened, but Josephus in history tells us a little bit more details. During this time, during that 2 years that Paul was imprisoned, there was this major uprising, and there was Jews and Gentiles who got into a clash. And Felix, he had a history here. Felix did not like Jews, and so what Felix did was he sent in his army and he slaughtered a bunch of Jews. He took out, and it was primarily the Jews that he went after, he targeted. So again, the Jewish leaders complained about him. The Jewish leaders sent a message to Caesar, and Caesar relieved Felix of his position and recalled him to come to Rome. That's not a good thing to have happen to you when you're in a ruling position. To be recalled to Caesar is a problem. And it sounds like, based on chapter 24, at the end of that, in verse 27, it sounds like the Jewish leaders had been pushing Felix all during this 2-year time frame. So what Felix did was he wants to get in good. He wants, is kind of the words I would use is, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'll do something good for you. You lighten my charges. Send something to Caesar so that I won't get hit quite so hard when I have to go stand before him. So say something nice about me, and I will take care of Paul for a while. That's the atmosphere that's going on. And this is what Festus is going to be walking into. We go from a very corrupt, very prideful ruler under Felix. We go from one he just procrastinated, and now we're going to go to a Festus. Now, Festus was very proactive. He tried to make things happen, did a good job at that. We're going to see some bad things he does. Next week, we're going to start Agrippa II. I don't know how to describe him. He's just perverted. If there was ever a dysfunctional family, it was Agrippa. It was the Herodian dynasty. They were corrupt. They were a bad thing. And Felix is mixed into that group as well. If you remember, Drusilla, his wife, that's part of Herod's kids. So this is where we got this whole mess going on. But in our text today, we're going to see some things. And I trust that as you come away from this message, I want you to notice this intense bitterness that's going to happen. And let me just forewarn you, we're going to see this bitterness in unsaved people, but in no way is this limited to the unsaved. Even we deal with this constantly. And we're going to see this intense bitterness, and it's going to manifest itself in this persecution against Paul, in this hatred and the lying. And it's frustrating, as this would have been for the Apostle Paul. We're going to see him trusting the Lord, and he's going to be just keeping on moving, he's going to trust him, he's going to keep serving him. And what's exciting, again, we saw this some in Sunday school this morning, we're going to see how God can use the unsaved to accomplish his purposes. How he can work even in spite of our sin, even working sinlessly with our sin. God can do these things, and we should trust him because of it. So there's your overview. Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll look at our text. Father, thank you so much for your goodness. Lord, I thank you that you are in control. Lord, you're good to us, and Lord, you do good. Help us to trust you. Help us to be wise. Father, I ask that you would use this brief time we have together to help us to see your word clearly. Help us to understand our sin, our problems, and Lord, but you just work in us and minister to us. As a result of this time, I ask for your help as I preach. Please keep my words accurate. Help me to be true to this text and not to be a distraction. Lord, I pray in some way you would use this time to bring glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. First thing we're going to see in this text is the plot against Paul. I'm going to take a time out, and I'm going to just throw this little zinger. I know I've said this before. I'll say it again. I've been questioned before. Why do I give out these handouts? Why do I put things on the back? Why do I just repeat myself by doing all three of them? You're not getting graded on the handout. If you don't like it, put it away and don't use it. If you don't like what's behind me, don't look at it. I do this because some people learn by hearing, which is what I'm talking. You can hear. Some people learn better when they get to write. I put it in front of us. You can write. If you don't like it, don't write. Some people learn by seeing. Duh. Okay, that's why I do all these things. So if it doesn't work for you, put it away and just listen, and we'll go from there. So, okay. Commercial's over. The plot against Paul, verse number 1. Now, when Festus was come into the province, after 3 days, he ascended from Caesarea to Jerusalem. So just to understand what's going on. Festus, remember, he came into Caesarea. Caesarea, and we've seen pictures of this place. They called it like a little Rome. He came in, he's comfortable, he just went off a long journey. If it was me, I would want to lay down and sleep for a few days. He came in on day 1. He rested day 2. Day 3, he's off to Jerusalem of all places. I appreciate this. This guy is doing good. He is inheriting problems. He's inheriting the Jews. They are constantly an issue with anyone who has ruled over them. So what does he do? He goes immediately to the center of Judaism, and he starts trying to mend fences. He starts trying to make headway, and that's the only way we're going to get problems fixed. He starts trying to get it done. I appreciate that about Festus. Verse number 2. Then the high priest and the chief priests and the chief of the Jews, so that would be your Sanhedrin, they informed against him. They just give you a little bit of word. I'm going to change some words here, or add some words. Continually informed against him. They kept it up. They wouldn't. Okay, this is not the right way to say this. Bear with me. They wouldn't shut their mouths. They just kept piling it on. Paul doing it, Paul doing it, Paul. Okay, they just kept piling it on. We do this today. Okay, sometimes we need to be quiet. But they kept doing this. The Jews informed him against Paul and besought him, begged him, and desired, there's your continually, kept on desiring favor against him, that he would send for him to Jerusalem. Now, if it just ended there, it'd be okay. But he says, laying wait in the way to kill him. Now, this is sad verses. These 2 verses are very sad. You got the leading religious men of the whole nation, and they're the ones who were involved in this. I was looking at I pulled up something. I was trying to find a site to do some work yesterday, I believe it was, and boom, this news article pops up. And the news article was of a leading religious figure in Baptist circles, I think still Baptist circles, had a downfall, had these issues against him. And what does the world like to do? Here's the leadership: attack. They're held to a higher standard. Here you've got your Jewish leadership, and they are purposefully, willingly desiring to get in and tell lies and attack. And it says, the end of verse 3, they're trying to set up assassins to kill Paul. This is your leadership that's doing this. They're supposed to be the example of godliness. So they kept on informing, bringing charges, it's legal charges. They besought, they kept urging him repeatedly. The word besought is to urge repeatedly. The word desired is to beg and request repeatedly. They keep it up. They want Festus to do them a favor. Now we know what a favor is. Okay, that's something you want done that you don't deserve. I don't have any reason to be asking for this. Do me a favor. Help me out, even though I've done nothing to deserve this. That's what they're doing. And all the while they're asking for this. Their whole motive is so that they can attack Paul on the way up and have him killed. This is their plan. I read one person who said they didn't trust the Roman legal process, so they took matters into their own hands. I don't agree with that. I think they did trust the Roman legal process. They knew that Paul was innocent. They knew that a just Roman judge would find Paul again innocent. And so they got to take matters into their own hands because they trusted the legal process. They trusted truth to come out. So they want to circumvent it. They have no case, so they want to kill Paul. You and I know that we should expect persecution. We know that we should expect rejection. Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. This is going to happen. This is the way it is. But what I want us to do for just a minute is look at the flip side of it. Let's look at the people who are doing the hating. Why is it that these Jews, these religious Jews, are so bitter? And we're going to camp on that word for a few minutes. What is it that has made them so bitter? Think about this. Paul has been out of their lives for 2 years, and they have been nursing and aiding along and helping themselves. They've been wanting this animosity against Paul for 2 full years. And it's not just that they want the animosity, they feel justified in doing this. They honestly feel that they're doing God himself a service by being against Paul. So what is the source? And here, and bring it back to you and me for a minute. What is the source of this bitterness? When you and I have it, people, it's the same source as what the Jews had. The source of this bitterness is totally demonic. What did Jesus say? You are of your father, the devil. And the lust of your father you'll do. He was a murderer from the beginning. Is that not what the Jews are doing? They're looking to murder. Is that not what you and I do when we have hatred towards someone? If you hate, you're guilty. We do the exact same thing. And it should bother us when we look at these examples. Now, this is not on your notes. I think I left you a lot of room to be able to write in if you want. If you can't, flip it, do what you need to, or don't write it all. But I see 4 things here that I want you to be thinking on regarding bitterness. And then we'll move on. The source of bitterness is not the Holy Spirit. You can rephrase this. I can excuse myself all I want when I'm bitter, and I can use reasonings and just think in my own head how righteous my motives are, how righteous my cause is. But when I'm bitter, mark my word, that is not coming from God. That is coming from Satan himself. It is demonic because we are exhibiting hatred, and it's nobody else's fault. You can't push the bitterness onto someone else. See, if there's a legitimate problem that I have with you, if I have a legitimate issue, if there is a sin issue, I am commanded bluntly, go to you. Not sit there and nurse my little hurt feelings, not be crying and all upset because things aren't going my way. Grow up, Rick. I do this. I think I know I've shared this before. There are times I'm driving down the road and things have just been bombarding me, and I'm having an argument with somebody that's not in the car with me. And I win. Every time I win, because they don't come up with a good argument back at me. That's just my bitterness. That's not of God. It is my bitterness. And we need to be, if there's an issue, we go to the person and we go fast. Take care of the issue. Bitterness also, it doesn't usually, I'll use this word, stay even. So if you're bitter, keep saying you. If I'm bitter with you, guess what? In 3 weeks, if I'm still bitter, that bitterness is not on the same plane, it grows. And that bitterness, it doesn't just grow in my own mind. That bitterness usually spreads out to some other people because I'll let out these little comments. Bitterness grows. There's a high priest. Last time we looked at a high priest in Acts, it was the high priest Ananias. He was nasty. He was a bad guy. He's not the high priest at this point. The high priest now is a guy, his name was Ishmael. But he had this same hatred for Paul as Ananias did. You know what? That bitterness keeps spreading out. It infects other people. Whether it's directly, indirectly, your bitterness will eat you up. And it will just get stronger and stronger. Another thing, bitterness blinds us. This is so illogical, what these guys are doing. Just think about the illogic of what these guys are doing. Paul he will be under, when they bring him up, a heavy Roman guard. The Romans have proved this. They're going to guard this Roman citizen. And so these very smart people, that's sarcasm, these guys are going to attack the Roman army to kill Paul. Can you tell what's going to happen? The Romans are going to wipe you out. At least some of you are going to die. And if you do end up killing some Roman soldiers and you kill Paul, they're going to catch you and you're going to get crucified. They don't take this kind of stuff lightly in Rome. And these guys are thinking, well, we'll just catch him and kill him. And your bitterness will blind you so much you won't think straight. You won't be logical. And it's craziness, okay? Your bitterness blinds you. It also is going to ruin your walk with Jesus. It's going to ruin your life in general, but it will ruin your walk with Jesus. So, okay, all that said, how do we fix our bitterness? I don't want you to raise your hand. I got a feeling if I said, how many of you have ever been bitter? Maybe how many of you are bitter right now about something? I think every hand would probably have to go up. If you ever wonder, the best definition I've heard for bitterness is really an illustration. You put something nasty in your mouth with a bitter taste and it stays there a while. I don't like that. Yeah, I got certain things I don't like in my mouth. But that bitter taste just stays around. It's gross. That's a good word for bitterness. It puts something that has a bad taste in your mouth. When you think about something, your temperature goes up. Your attitude gets sour. That's bitterness. So what do you do about it? This may sound simplistic, but this is what you need. 1 John 1:9. We confess it as sin. We agree with God. God, you hate this. I need to hate this. I agree with you. You're right. I'm wrong. Please forgive me. That's how you deal with your bitterness. And you're going to hear this. You've heard this verse so many times. 2 Corinthians 5:9. We need to strive to live our lives in a way that is pleasing to God. If that's not our passion, we are wrong. We're not walking with Jesus. We must be striving to please him. It's got to be our passion. Your application statement. More often than not, bitterness makes the bitter person miserable while leaving its victim unscathed. 9 times out of 10, the person you're bitter against has no clue what's going on. They're happy. They're going about life. They're serving the Lord. Everything's great. You're the one that's messed up. So, point number 2, the prescription by Felix. Look at verse 4. I said Felix. I meant Festus. Listen to what I mean, not what I say. Verse 4, but Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea and that he himself would depart shortly thereafter. Let them therefore, said he, which among you are able, go down with me and accuse this man, if there be any wickedness in him. And when he had tarried among them more than 10 days, a couple of weeks, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, commanded Paul to be brought. Now, again, we don't know a lot about Festus. Josephus said he served about 2 years and then he died. But it sounds like from the description, he was a much better governor than Felix, and he's a whole lot better than the guy that came after him. But what it does tell us here that I appreciate, he didn't cave into the Jews yet. He didn't cave into them at this point. Now, it could have been he's thinking to himself, pragmatic. If I go down and have to come back up, that's a lot of traveling, and I don't want to do this. I'm going to just leave him down there. It could be I don't want to give up my authority. Maybe these things had something to do with it. But he does say some really wise things. And I want us to learn from this unsaved man. He wants his accusers, he wants the guys making the accusations to stand face to face with the accused. That's Roman law. And Roman law is good in that sense. It's also God's law. You stand before your accused. And we see that he stayed there almost 2 weeks, went back to Caesarea, and literally the next day, after this hard trip, immediately he jumps on it and he calls Paul in. He didn't waste time. Point being, he didn't push off his responsibilities onto somebody else to make his job easier. I like this about Festus. He has some good character traits. Now, he's not a Christian, but can we learn from some things that we've seen just in these short verses? We have responsibilities. You have responsibilities. For some reason, people don't like to hear this much because you have responsibilities in this church. We cannot push our responsibilities off onto someone else. Case in point, Matthew 5. You don't need to turn there. Matthew 5:23. These are some verses, by the way, that we were looking at Wednesday night. That book I just forgot the name of it. Reinvent? Rediscover. Rediscover Church. Thank you. We'll get there. Right now, we've just got finished going through the need for church membership. And part of church membership is having the accountability, which leads to the need for church discipline when it comes up. And we're going through the church disciplines. That's really what these passages I'm about to hit are going over. Matthew 5:23 is the passage that speaks about if you're serving the Lord, you're trying to worship him, and you remember that your brother has something against you, put your stuff down and go to that brother. If you remember that you've done something against someone, you go to them. Now, the flip side of that is Matthew 18. That's the church discipline passage. If someone's offended you, you go to them. In an ideal world, both people are going towards the other one and they meet in the middle with a heart to want to reconcile. That's how things should be working. Galatians 6, verse 1, when you see a brother overtaken in a fault, you at your spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of meekness. These are responsibilities that we have. I appreciate in that passage with Galatians, it said, if you see a brother overtaken in a fault, you, which are spiritual, go. It doesn't say you go call somebody else to go with you. It doesn't say you go call me to go with you. You go do it. You take care of the issue because that's your responsibility because you saw them. We have responsibilities and we need to exercise our responsibilities. Hebrews 10 makes it so clear for us. Part of the reason, the main reason really, we gather together like this is to exhort one another. That doesn't mean you come here to get exhorted. You come to exhort. Now, getting exhorted is kind of a nice benefit of it. But you're to come and exhort. We should be coming into this room looking for opportunities to do our responsibility and not shrug it off on someone else. Let's be looking for how we can exercise our responsibilities. Notice in verse 5, another thing he did that was good. He said that last phrase, if there's any wickedness. He did not assume guilt, but just because somebody complained. Ever done that? It is easy. It is so easy. Proverbs 18:17 is the passage that speaks about when you hear a person who does their talking, everything sounds like, yeah, they're just so justified, they're so right, and then you hear the rest of the story. And you find out they're not right. A key verse. I would encourage everyone to know this verse, Proverbs 18:13. It is a shameful thing. He that answers a matter before he hears it, it's folly and shame to him. When you and I hear yakking, when we hear accusations and we make up our mind without checking facts, you're a shameful fool. That's Proverbs 18:13. We need to remember that as we deal with people, because we're constantly dealing with people. Verse number 6. Notice that he went down there and the next day he dealt with the problem. Ephesians 4:26-27, deal with problems as they come up. Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. When we do this, we're giving place to the devil. We're letting the devil have a foothold in our lives, and we're going to struggle. At best, we're going to struggle. We can learn some good principles from this unsaved man, but a key point I want you to see with these verses, God is able to use even unsaved people to accomplish his will. Our God is worthy to be trusted. This is going to sound blunt, but it doesn't matter what we're going through. God's in control. God can and will and desires to work in us, and he is worthy of our trust. We need to be reminded of this. Application statement. Let's purpose to work with others in love and to resolve problems biblically. If we could get that one thing down, you ask how smooth life could be. Let's do things biblically. If you and I will slow down, I don't know about you, but I have trouble with that. I have trouble slowing down, listening, thinking. I just want to move. I want to act. I got to go. It's not good. If we'll slow down and ask questions like this, is what I'm doing God's way, or is what I'm doing my way, or even the devil's way? Is what I'm doing building unity within the body of Christ, or is what I'm doing sowing discord? Now, a verse that we don't like to hear much is, God hates. It doesn't say it's sowing of discord in Proverbs 6. God hates he who sows discord. That's rough language. We got to be careful with this. Most of the problems that we have within our families, that we have in our workplace, that we have in our church, they would be solved before they started if we would ask these simple questions. I encourage you. Be rough on yourself with that. Ask yourself, am I helping or am I hurting? Third thing, the proceeding in court. Verse number 7. When he was come, the Jews which came down from Jerusalem stood round about and made many grievous complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. So here, they bring Paul in. And the words it uses here, where they stood round about, literally, they encircled him. It is a threatening position they've taken. They are coming around. They are trying to intimidate him. It's like having a lamb in the middle of a bunch of wolves trying to pounce it. What they don't know is that they're toothless. They think they still got their teeth and they can do some damage, but they're toothless. They can't do a thing against him, but they're trying to intimidate. And they are bringing, the rest of this verse, a boatload of baseless complaints that they still can't prove. And you gotta assume they're hoping if they can just keep slinging this mud, something's gonna stick. And Festus is going to have some reason to say, yep, your cause is just, I'll kill you. That's their whole goal. They want Paul killed, but nothing's sticking. And they don't have any proof because Paul has been living a blameless life. Now, does that mean Paul is sinless? Absolutely not. Paul said so clearly, I got this constant fight going on inside of me. The things I would do, I don't do. The things I wouldn't do, I do. And it's just constant fight. He was not a sinless man by any stretch, but he was blameless. He was blameless. The way that you can be blameless is that sin comes up, you deal with it. Another sin comes up, you deal with it. If it means you need to go to someone, you deal with it. You keep dealing with your sin. So all that these people have to go on is to resort to lies. That's a good mark for Paul. That's how there's an incident happened. It's been a while back, but there were some accusations made against me, and the people who had made them couldn't find anything. They didn't know me that well, but they couldn't find anything that they could legitimately blame me for. So they resorted to lies. And it worked. It worked. I'm thankful that they had to lie about me to get what they wanted. I want my life to be that way. It should be a goal for you and me. That should describe us. It should be our goal, again, 2 Corinthians 5:9, to live a life that pleases our God. As I was studying these verses, I mean, literally, as I was reading these two verses, looking at material on these verses, and working on these, during that exact time, I was literally in the middle of some attacks that were just getting thrown in my face. They were hurtful. They were exaggerated claims. They were inaccurate. And I know the truth. I should be expecting persecution. I know this. I know that I should expect attacks either from unsaved people, from Christians who aren't walking with the Lord, or there is an issue. I know this truth, but what I was thinking in my head was, why are you doing this to me? Why is this coming up? Why am I getting beat up with this thing? This message was for me. I needed this passage. And I am so thankful that at that point in time, God ministered to me through his word. That's what he does. And it was a very special time for me. That's why I'm sharing this with you. It was a special thing for me. I ended up having, after I was praying over this, I was thinking, Lord, what could I do different? Lord, what do I need to confess? What are areas that I need to change? How do I make things right? It changes your whole outlook. When you start looking at God, you are in control. And yes, it doesn't matter what gets thrown at me. You can still work. You're good. And he is good. We need to remind ourselves of these things. A guy named Butler wrote this quote. He said, when evil seems overpowering and threatening to destroy, be encouraged that God is with the righteous, and therefore they will eventually be the victors. This is not a movie where you pray a prayer and all of a sudden God blesses everything you touch and everything goes perfect. No. You know what? One day we're going to stand before God. And at a minimum, then you're going to be the victor. Walk with him. Kent Hughes wrote this: when we are wrongly accused, when we're slandered or treated harshly, we must remember that God, the judge of heaven, will hold men accountable. There's a tendency when you hear about they're going to be held accountable, there's a tendency to have this mindset of they'll get theirs. They're going to get what's coming to them. It's almost like a rally cry. They're going to be punished one day. It shouldn't be what comes into our minds. I pity people who have to stand before God and answer for wrong things. That is a bad thing. That is going to be a terrible thing when people have to give an answer for the unkindness that they've given to others. Just like the Sanhedrin here, they're going to have to give an answer for the unkindness that they gave to Paul. There's going to be an accounting. I so much want to live my life in such a way that I don't have to hear. I've said this one as well. I don't know if I'm going to hear words. I remember saying things and doing things where my dad was disappointed in me. and he'd give me the look. It's kind of my thinking was, you moron, what were you thinking? I'm disappointed in you. And that's all I needed. It would crush me. I don't want to see my Lord shaking his head at me. I want to hear that well done. I love that idea of well done from my Jesus. That is what I want to see. So I want that for others. Verse number 8. While he answered for himself, repeatedly answered for himself. So the wording here makes it sound like as they brought up multiple charges, he gave multiple defenses. This was a constant. This was not what we read in 15 seconds. This was a long, drawn-out process. While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar, have I offended anything at all. So he kept answering these charges. And the answers that are recorded here sound like it's the same charges that were brought up last time against Felix. They've had 2 years to find something that will make sense, that will be able to stick, and they still can't find anything. So they had 2 years to do it, no success, and this is a drawn-out deal. So what Paul did in order to defend himself is he simply stated the truth. Here's what happened. I like that because, it's so hard to remember when you lied and keep covering your tracks. He just told the truth. He said what was true, and that's what we need to do. And when we tell the truth, whether it affects us or not, negatively, we just trust the Lord to work out the details. Let God do his thing, and if it means issues, so be it. But we don't give up hope. We tell the truth, and we keep trusting God and serving him. Your application statement on this one: persecution will come. So let's strive to live blameless and trust the Lord to take care of us. I like when Jesus was preaching on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 11 and 12, blessed, fortunate, blessed by God are you when men shall revile you and persecute you and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. For my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which are before you. Let's make sure as the persecution comes that it's for his sake and not for our sake. Let's be serving him. Let's be serious-minded about serving Jesus. Your last point, the problems for Festus. Problems for Festus. Notice the first word in verse 9, but. Even though there's no proof, even though there's no evidence against Paul, it's just these false accusations, but Festus, willing to do the Jews a pleasure, answered Paul and said, will you go up to Jerusalem and there be judged of these things before me? It wasn't that many verses ago we saw Festus standing firm and not willing to compromise. Now he waffles. Here we see him doing the compromise. The word, he's willing to give them a favor. Back in chapter 24, verse 27, Felix willing to show the Jews a pleasure. Up in verse 3, he desired favor against them. All this is the same word. He wanted to make points. He's wanting, it's a favor because he knows Paul is innocent. What he's doing is playing both sides. He wants to make the Jews happy by having him go to Jerusalem. And he's saying, Paul, you can be happy. I'll judge you there too. It'll be okay. I know you're innocent. I can find you innocent there as well as find you innocent here. So he's willing to pacify millions of Jews by sacrificing Paul, by putting Paul in danger. Millions versus one man. Why not do it? Maybe he doesn't understand the charges. Maybe he wants more information because we know future verses, he doesn't know what's going on with Judaism. He doesn't get it. I don't think that's his issues. He's wanting to pacify people. It's a political move. But Paul knows these Jewish leaders. Paul, remember as well, 2 years ago, 40 plus assassins doing what they had to do to get a chance to get at him and kill him. Paul knows how he was going out and hunting Christians, how he was seeing Christians put to death, and he knows the Jews are still wanting to do the same thing. He's not foolish. He knows it's not a good idea. This is the second time around, and he should still be found not guilty. He's been sitting there for 2 years. So there's a frustration level here. Verse 10, then said Paul, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I've done no wrong, as thou very well knowest. Paul's words here are really direct. And here is what Paul was getting to. I think he's probably a little bit agitated based on the wording. This is at least a mild rebuke of Festus. He's saying, I stand where I ought to be. He's not saying, well, this is a nice place for me to be. This is where I ought to be here. This is a good place. What he's saying here is, there's no options. I must be tried here. I am a Roman citizen. This is where I'm supposed to be tried. This is the legal place for me as a Roman. And he finishes up that verse with saying, I have done nothing wrong, and you know it good and well. That's the end of verse number 10. Thou knowest very well. You know I've done nothing wrong, and this is where I'm supposed to be found innocent. What you're suggesting is unlawful. So this is a rebuke that Paul is bringing against Festus. And this is a side issue. This is not where this passage is going. Paul was willing to pull up his rights. He was willing to claim his Roman rights. It's not wrong to claim the rights that you have by civil government. God has ordained civil government. He has given us whatever rights we may or may not have. He has given us these rights, and we can affirm them. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing spiritual about us rolling over and saying, oh, I'm just going to be Mary Martyr. Come get me. There's nothing wrong with claiming the rights that we have. And that's what Paul is doing here. Verse number 11, for if I be an offender or committed anything worthy of death, I refuse not to die. But if there be none of these things whereof they accuse me, nobody can deliver me unto them. I appeal to Caesar. So if I'm guilty, punish me. That's what he's saying. And if I'm not guilty, nobody can deliver me to them. It's unlawful. And just think of it from Paul's point of view. If I can't get a win, if you will, out of unbiased Caesarea, judging me as a Roman, if I can't get a win out of here, it's going to be impossible to get a win up in Jerusalem because they hate me. So from his point of view, I can see where he's coming from. So what does he do? He appeals to the highest court. He appeals to Caesar. At that time, Caesar was Nero. Now, I've mentioned before that Nero was a psychopath. That guy was wacko. At this point in time, he wasn't doing extremely weird things. That comes a few years later. Here, probably not a bad thing to appeal to this guy, but that's what he did. He appealed to Nero. Verse number 12. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, as thou go to Caesar, you go to Caesar? To Caesar you're going to go. The wording used here is more of a threat. It's not just a statement of fact. He's saying, you don't know what you're getting yourself into, Paul. You really want to go to Caesar? Go get it. I'm going to let him have at you. This is a threat that he's making against Paul. Maybe it gave Festus some initial relief. Now I don't have to mess with this. Now I don't have to deal with the Jews and their hatred of Paul, and then they're going to be hating me. I don't have to deal with all this stuff. But listen, compromising comes back to bite you. And it's going to come back to bite him. We're going to see it in the next passage. This compromising will always get you. In his case, I don't have a charge to send with him. And he knows he has no charge. I'm going to send somebody to my boss's boss's boss, the big guy, and say, you need to try him. I have no clue what he's done wrong. I have no clue what the charges are, but you need to do this. Festus is going to look bad. And that's what brings us in to the whole next section that we're going to look at. There's no charge, so he is in a tough spot. So what we have here is God, again, he uses another compromising judge to have Paul get where he wants him to go. And Rome is going to pay for him to go to Rome. God said, you're going, and Rome is going to pay to actually have him go there. This may not have been the timing that Paul wanted, but God keeps his promises. Remember that for you. God keeps his promises. It may not be your timing. It may not be the way you want it to go. We can trust our Lord, and we must trust our Lord. Your application statement: show integrity and speak the truth, and then trust the Lord with the details. Seems to be a lesson that we can struggle with all of our lives. But this is a challenge for us that we need. It's exciting for me as I look at a passage like this with Paul to see the impact that one man here, one committed Christian, can have on the world around him. If you're thinking this is a Paul thing, that he's the one who God had his hand on Paul, so that God can use him, get that thought out of your mind. God can use you. He can use one committed Christian. The committed is the hard part. Are you willing to stand up for Jesus? Are you willing to not just have Jesus be something that you tack onto your life one day a week and the rest of the week's yours? That's not Christianity. That is not what Jesus saved us for. He wants to be Lord of our lives. He wants us yielding to him constantly. And if there's areas where we're resisting or he's kind of a side issue during the week, listen, you're wrong. You're wrong. He is to be Lord of every area. And then, mark my word, he can use anybody he wants. He's using unsaved people. But he wants to see committed Christians impacting the world around them. He wants us to have this close walk with the Lord. And when we do that, it will generate this kind of confidence in us. It will generate a courage in our lives to walk with him and to proclaim him. But when we hold on to the bitterness, when we hold on to sin in our lives, it binds us. It trips us up. It makes us less effective for the cause of Christ. I just encourage you this morning. Let's choose to follow him wholeheartedly. Not just follow him when it's convenient. Not just follow him when people are looking. Let's follow him wholeheartedly. Let's stand for him. If you've never become a follower of Jesus, we start that close walk with God by understanding what God thinks of our sin, by understanding and trusting him. He alone is the one who can rescue us from sin's penalty. We need to understand these facts. We need to call on him to rescue us. We can do nothing. It is all about what he's done on the cross. If we can help you, if you've got questions, please talk to us. Christian, I don't think anybody is going to say this morning, I want to live my life bound by sin. It'd be the most foolish thing you could say. You don't have to do that. You don't have to live your life bound by sin. You choose to live your life bound by sin. God has given us everything that we need for life and godliness. He has given us what we need so that we can have this same exact confidence that Paul had. I encourage you, do business with God this morning. Where there's areas you need to change, do it. I can help you. Talk to me. Would love to be able to do that.
we're so grateful